In 1882, Thomas Edison lit up 59 buildings in Lower Manhattan with the first commercial electrical grid in human history. It was the moment the modern world began. And from that moment forward, one thing was decided. Not by science, not by physics, not by what was possible, but by the men who owned the infrastructure. Energy would cost money. Every light bulb, every heated room, every turning motor, every single watt of power consumed by every human being on Earth would pass through a meter, through a wire, through a system owned by someone who would charge for access to it. That decision, made not in a laboratory but in a boardroom, is still in effect today. You paid for energy this month. You will pay for it next month. Your children will pay for it. Every economy on Earth is built on the assumption that energy has a price, and that price flows upward to whoever controls the infrastructure. But in 1902, a man built something that threatened to end that arrangement permanently. Not theoretically, not on paper. He built it. He demonstrated it publicly. Multiple witnesses saw it operate. And then everything he built, everything he documented, and every blueprint he had ever drawn was gone. What he had discovered was not magic. It was not fantasy. The physics behind what he built is real, documented, and taught in university physics departments today under a name that has nothing to do with free energy and everything to do with the natural electrical state of the planet you are standing on. The Earth is a conductor. The atmosphere above it is a conductor. Between the Earth's surface and the upper atmosphere, there exists a permanent electrical potential difference, a voltage gradient of approximately 100 volts per meter of altitude. That means that at a height of 100 meters, the electrical potential difference between the air and the ground is 10,000 volts. This is not a theory. It is a measured, documented, reproducible physical fact. It has been measured continuously since the 1920s. The resonant frequency of this electrical system, the heartbeat of the Earth's own electromagnetic field, was formally described by physicist Winfried Schumann in 1952 and is called the Schumann resonance. It operates at 7.83 Hz. It never stops. It requires no fuel. It produces no emissions. It is generated by the interaction between solar radiation and the Earth's magnetic field, and it will continue operating for as long as the sun exists. What the man in 1902 built was a device designed to tap into that field, not to store energy, not to convert it from one form to another through combustion or chemical reaction, to extract it directly from the medium that surrounds every living thing on this planet at every moment of every day. The principle is not different in kind from what a radio antenna does. A radio antenna extracts electromagnetic energy from the air and converts it into electrical current. What he built operated on the same fundamental principle applied to a lower frequency and a vastly larger energy gradient. Nikola Tesla had arrived at the same conclusion 2 years earlier. In 1899 and 1900, Tesla operated his experimental laboratory in Colorado Springs specifically to test atmospheric energy extraction at scale. His notes from that period, now partially available in archives, describe exactly the phenomenon the 1902 inventor was working with. Tesla wrote that the Earth itself was a reservoir of electrical energy that could be tapped from any point on its surface by a properly tuned receiver. Tesla called it the transmission of power without wires. He was building his Wardenclyffe Tower on Long Island to demonstrate it at full scale when his funding was cut by J.P. Morgan in 1906, and the project was shut down permanently. J.P. Morgan's reported response when Tesla explained that the system would allow anyone anywhere on Earth to access electrical power for free has been repeated many times. He allegedly said, "If anyone can draw on the power, where do I put the meter?" That question, where do I put the meter, is the most important question in the history of energy, because the answer to it determined which technologies were developed and which were suppressed, which inventors were celebrated and which were erased, and what kind of world you woke up in this morning. The man who built the device in 1902 was not Tesla. He was working independently in a different city with different methods, arriving at the same destination. And unlike Tesla, who had powerful backers, public fame, and decades of documented work behind him, this man had none of those protections. He had only the machine. And for 3 weeks in the autumn of 1902, that was enough. The demonstration took place on a Tuesday. Approximately 40 people were present. The guest list was not random. The inventor had spent months identifying the specific individuals he wanted in that room: engineers, journalists, 2 university physics professors, and 3 businessmen with enough capital and enough independence from the established energy infrastructure to potentially fund further development. What they witnessed over the course of 2 hours has been described in 2 surviving documents. The first is a brief account published in a local newspaper 3 days after the demonstration. The article is 4 paragraphs long. It describes a device that produced electrical current with no visible power source, powered a lamp and a small motor simultaneously, and operated continuously for the duration of the demonstration without any fuel input of any kind. The journalist's tone is skeptical, but his description of what he observed is specific and detailed. The second document is a letter. It was written by one of the engineers present at the demonstration, a man with formal training in electrical engineering who had worked previously for one of the major electrical companies. He wrote the letter to a colleague who had been unable to attend. The letter runs to 6 pages. It describes the apparatus in technical detail: the antenna element, the tuning circuit, the conversion stage, the output configuration, and it attempts to explain the underlying physics in terms consistent with what was then known about atmospheric electricity. He could not fully explain it. What he wrote instead, and this is the sentence that matters, is this: "I have no framework within my current understanding of electrical science that accounts for what I observed. The device operated, the lamp burned, the motor turned. No fuel was consumed. I checked the apparatus myself before the demonstration began and found no concealed battery, no hidden wire, no alternative power source of any kind. What I saw either represents a genuine discovery of a principle we do not yet understand, or it is the most sophisticated deception I have ever encountered. Having examined the man and his work for 2 hours, I do not believe it is deception." 6 pages, written by a trained engineer, describing a working device. This letter exists. It was discovered in a private archive in the 1970s by a researcher studying the history of alternative energy. A copy was made. The copy has circulated in certain research communities since then. The original has not been publicly located. Now, here is what happened after the demonstration. The 3 businessmen who attended did not invest, not because they doubted what they had seen. The letter from the engineer suggests that everyone present understood they had witnessed something real. They did not invest because within 48 hours of the demonstration, 2 of the 3 had received visits. We do not know who visited them. We know they were visited because one of the 2 businessmen mentioned it in a letter to a business partner written the following week. He described being advised, his word was advised, that investment in the device would be unwise, that the technology was unlikely to receive patent protection, that there were parties with significant interest in ensuring it did not reach commercial development. He did not invest. Neither did the others. The inventor spent the following 2 weeks attempting to secure alternative support. He wrote to universities. He wrote to independent investors. He wrote to Tesla directly. There is no record of whether Tesla replied. On a Friday in October of 1902, someone broke into his workshop. The police report, which does exist, filed with the local precinct, describes forced entry through the rear door, overturned furniture, and the removal of an unspecified quantity of documents and equipment. The inventor reported that every blueprint he had drawn was gone, every calculation, every notebook. The original apparatus was still present. They had not taken the machine. but everything that would allow someone to understand how to build it was removed. On the Sunday following the break-in, the workshop caught fire. The cause was listed as undetermined. The building burned completely. The apparatus, the machine itself, was destroyed. On Monday, the inventor filed his 12th patent application from memory. He was attempting to reconstruct enough of his documentation to establish a legal record. The application was received by the patent office. It was never processed. No rejection notice was issued. No acknowledgement of receipt beyond the initial filing stamp. The application entered the system and ceased to exist within it. The inventor made 3 more attempts to rebuild his work over the following 4 years. Each attempt was interrupted, twice by financial pressure that appeared to arrive at suspiciously convenient moments, once by a legal dispute over the workshop space that consumed 18 months of his time and resources. By 1908, he had stopped. He lived until 1931. He never spoke publicly about the machine again. Let us be precise about what was lost that Sunday night in October of 1902. Not the machine itself. The machine was a demonstration model, a proof of concept. The physical apparatus that burned in that workshop could have been rebuilt. What was lost was the documentation. The 12 years of calculation that identified the specific tuning parameters required to match the device's resonant frequency to the Schumann resonance of the Earth's electromagnetic field. The engineering specifications that determined the exact geometry of the antenna element, the height, the diameter of the spherical terminal, the proportional relationship between those measurements and the target frequency. The conversion circuit design that allowed the extracted atmospheric energy to be transformed into usable direct current at a stable voltage. These are not simple things. They are the product of 12 years of systematic experimentation. They cannot be reconstructed from memory with sufficient precision to guarantee replication. And that is exactly the point. Breaking into a workshop and removing blueprints is not vandalism. It is not theft in the ordinary sense. It is the deliberate and targeted destruction of a specific category of knowledge, the kind of knowledge that, once gone, requires another 12 years of work to recover. By someone with the same insight, the same resources, and the same freedom from interference that produced it in the first place. The people who made that calculation understood something fundamental about how technological development works. An invention does not become real when it is built. It becomes real when it is documented, replicated, distributed, and absorbed into the body of shared human knowledge. Before that happens, it is just a machine in a room, and a machine in a room can be burned. Now consider what the world looked like in October of 1902 and what decision was being made that Sunday night. The oil industry was 11 years from the discovery of the East Texas field that would make petroleum the dominant global energy source for the next century. The electrical grid was expanding rapidly across American cities, but it was a centralized grid, built on the assumption that power had to be generated at a central point and distributed through wires that someone owned. The internal combustion engine had been demonstrated but had not yet replaced the horse. The automobile industry was 4 years old. Every single one of those systems, oil, centralized electricity, combustion engines, shared one characteristic. They required infrastructure that could be owned, metered, and monetized. Atmospheric energy extraction required none of that. A properly built receiver could be installed anywhere. It required no fuel delivery, no transmission lines, no meter. No monthly payment to a corporation that owned the wire coming into your home. The question J.P. Morgan allegedly asked about Tesla's system, "Where do I put the meter?" has no answer when the energy source is the electromagnetic field of the Earth itself. There is no meter. There is no infrastructure to own. There is no corporation positioned between the energy and the person who needs it. What burned in that workshop in 1902 was not just a machine. It was the last moment, the last documented, witnessed, physically demonstrated moment at which the trajectory of the 20th century could have gone in a different direction. Every war fought over oil fields. Every economy destabilized by energy prices. Every family that chose between heating and eating in a cold winter. Every ton of carbon released into the atmosphere by a century of combustion. Every political decision shaped by the strategic importance of petroleum. All of it traces back through a chain of decisions. Corporate decisions, political decisions, decisions made in boardrooms by men calculating returns on infrastructure investments, to a moment when an alternative existed. It was demonstrated publicly. It worked. And then it was gone. The photograph still exists. A small black and white image showing a wooden workbench, a copper apparatus, and a lamp that is on. No wire connecting it to anything. No explanation that satisfies the assumption that such a thing should not be possible. Just a lamp, burning, in a room where no lamp should have been burning. The machine in that photograph ran for 2 hours in front of 40 witnesses on a Tuesday in 1902. By the following Sunday, it was ash. The world you live in today, the price you paid for energy this month, the infrastructure that delivers it, the political arrangements that protect access to the resources that fuel it, was not inevitable. It was a choice, made by people who understood exactly what they were choosing and exactly what they were burning.